It's a double feature. My name is Summer, welcome back to my channel, and today we're going to be talking about Beetlejuice and Beetlejuice Beetlejuice. Now, this video was originally intended to be the third installment of the Gentleman's Guide to Chivalry, which is the nonsense placeholder name for the series I'm currently calling Off the Shelf Reviews, which is where I take a movie off my shelf and I review it. But that's sort of obvious. It's a little boring. It's not a very exciting or attention-grabbing title, and I'm having a lot of fun just making up nonsense placeholder names. So if you have an idea on a more dynamic SEO-grabbing title, then by all means let me know, and while you're doing my job for me, feel free to subscribe. Anyway, Beetlejuice. I own it. See it here in my hand. I went to the theater and I saw Beetlejuice Beetlejuice, and I knew I had to talk about both because I was just so pleasantly surprised by how delightful I found the sequel. So I'm going to do a quick synopsis of both films and then go into some reasons why I think the sequel works as well as it does. I am going to be going into spoilers for the new movie, so just keep that in mind. So, and then, without any further ado, let's talk Beetlejuice and Beetlejuice Beetlejuice. In Winter River, Connecticut, Adam and Barbara Maitland want nothing more than to enjoy their multi-week staycation fixing up their lovely dream home. Unfortunately, their plans are foiled when a very cute dog darts in front of their car, sending them careening into what I can only assume is the Winter River. We follow the now soggy Maitlands back home where strange things begin to happen. For one, Barbara's hands light on fire when she tries to warm herself in front of the fireplace. Also, neither one of them has a reflection in the mirror. Third, a new book has arrived in their small library. It's a tome called The Handbook for the Recently Deceased. And finally, when they try to step foot outside of their house, they find themselves on the yellow sands of Saturn's moon Titan, chased by a large claymation sandworm a la Dune. The Maitlands are dead.
I don't think we survived the crash.
Life after death is a lot to adjust to, especially when the guidebook
reads like stereo instructions.
The two are having a hard enough time coping when a woman who has plagued them since before their deaths, a realtor with a small daughter who won't stop trying to sell their house from under them, she keeps taking offers on a house that's not for sale. And they keep saying, hey, we're not selling our house. Well, guess who's able to sell the house now that nobody's there to tell her no? The realtor. I think her name is Jane. Anyway, Jane finally makes the sale. Congratulations, Jane. And the Dietzes move in. Charles, his new wife Delia, and their daughter Lydia. Charles is a finance bro sent to the countryside, much like women used to be sent to the sea to cure their hysteria after he had a small, tiny little mental breakdown. Delia is an up-and-coming modern artist whose sculpture leans toward the bizarre, and Lydia is, in her own words,
Strange and unusual.
our eternal goth queen, Winona Ryder. Tagging along with them is Otho, who I always forget is a part of this movie, but actually plays a large and critical role. He is Delia's friend and interior designer, and he's come along so that Delia... Hold on. I'm going to insert these clips wherever I can't legally put the full clip.
But I must express myself. If you don't let me gut out this house
And make it my own, then I
will go insane and I will take you with me!
Oh, I love that line. The Maitlands, now saddled with these big city yuppies, and yes, a brief pause actually. I want to clarify that I am calling the Dietzes yuppies because according to a single Google search and the Wikipedia results that showed up on the search page, a yuppie is a term coined in the 80s for a young professional person working in a city. Okay? Okay, so tell me why here on the back of this Beetlejuice DVD reads, what's a yuppie ghost couple to do when their quaint New England home is overrun by trendy New Yorkers? Yuppie ghost couple. Okay, who did this? Who is responsible for this? Because let's ask ourselves, who here matches the definition that we've just decided is the correct definition of the word yuppie, a young professional in the city? The financier and his artist wife? Or the local hometown hardware store owner and his lady wife in Gingham? I take issue with this. I take issue with whoever was responsible for that. All right. Anyway, the Maitlands, now saddled with these big city yuppies who seem intent on destroying the home they love, realize, hey, we're ghosts. Let's haunt this house until they leave. So they put in their best efforts. Macabre displays where Barbara's like holding up her husband's still talking head and a knife.
Wham! His kappa is detated from his head.
Much like you see here, except imagine, if you will, she's holding his head in her hand and he's still chatting because they're just a charming dead couple. Okay. But the thing is, it doesn't matter how scary you look if no one can see you. And that's their problem. They try several similar attempts and nobody bats an eye because nobody knows they're there. So they make their way back up to their locked attic, which is the only place they've managed to keep for themselves at this point, when suddenly their TV turns on without warning and a commercial starts playing for Beetlejuice, a bioexorcist who's taken up residence in the tiny little model town version of Winter River that Adam built. This guy claims to specialize in getting the living out of the dead's homes, and all they need to do is
Say it once, say it twice, third time's the charm.
But Adam reads in the handbook that if they draw a door on the wall in chalk and knock on it 3 times, instead of, saying this weird-looking dude's name 3 times, they can get help that way as well. And that seems a little bit more professional. It came from the manual, probably better than whatever that guy's deal is.
Yo, I got demons running all through me.
So that's what they decide to do instead. They draw the door, they knock 3 times, and help in this case is a meeting with Juno, their afterlife caseworker. They learn that they must spend 125 years on Earth before they can pass on, and in that time they only get 3 Class 1 D90 face-to-face meetings with Juno, and that they basically wasted their first meeting by calling on her without even finishing the handbook, and wasted it even further by leaving the handbook behind them in the attic, where, by the way, Lydia finds it and reads through it. Juno lets the Maitlands know that
I strongly suggest that you remove the Beetleses yourselves.
and she gives them only one piece of advice, and that is to avoid Beetlejuice, to not even say his name, because he used to be her assistant, and he's extremely bad news. Juno then disappears in a puff of smoke, and the Maitlands find that they've been gone for 3 full months, and their house is now completely unrecognizable. Adam and Barbara decide the next logical step is to go full classic Halloween ghost. I'm talking sheets over the head, little holes cut for the eyes, ooh, that kind of deal.
This is so corny. Is this what we've been reduced to, sheets?
And I see the logic. I see the logic there, because let's say you're standing there, you have no corporeal form, and no one can see you, but then you drape your non-corporeal form in a sheet, they can see the sheet, suddenly they can see you, it works. 1 + 1, does it not equal 2? All right, so I get it. Charles thinks it's Lydia playing a joke, so it doesn't work on him. Delia is zonked out of her gourd on meds, so it does not work on her. But it does work on Lydia. She starts taking Polaroids, thinking it's her parents, and it's only when she picks up one of the Polaroids and sees that there are no feet under this floating sheet that she realizes these are ghosts. So Lydia can see the Maitlands. The Maitlands, for the first time since their death, can speak to someone who's in the land of the living. And one thing is, at the beginning of the movie, it's made clear that the Maitlands are childless. That's one of the reasons that the realtor kept trying to sell their house. She was like, it's too big for someone without kids, which is rude. But it's also made clear that a family is something that they would have liked to start had they not, careened off of a bridge and into what I can only assume is the Winter River. Lydia, meanwhile, is constantly being ignored by both her father and her stepmother, Delia, and so, like 3 little puzzle pieces, they start to bond. And it's beautiful. Even with the new bonds forming, living with Charles and Delia Dietz is untenable. The Maitlands still cannot get through the handbook. Their efforts at haunting have fallen flat. Juno will not help them, and so, just to see what might happen, they call Beetlejuice.
Go ahead, Barbara, say it.
Beetlejuice.
And what happens is bad. Beetlejuice is dirty, skeezy, creepy, gross. He weirds them out. He pervs on Barbara. And despite his qualifications, and now I'm going to try and put as many clips as I can from this scene, but I'm also going to try and recreate it because it's one of my favorite parts. Let's see. What exactly are your... Oh, no! Heavens! My light! Oh my gosh!
What are your qualifications?
Well, I attended Juilliard. I'm
A graduate of the Harvard Business School. I've traveled
quite extensively. I lived through the Black Plague, and I had a pretty good time during that.
and I've seen The Exorcist.
But 167 times, and it keeps getting funnier every single time I see it.
Not to mention
The fact that you're talking to a dead guy. Now, what do you think? You think I'm qualified?
And even with that astounding list of qualifications, the Maitlands opt to go
Home!
and try one last time to get rid of the Dietzes on their own. Because they did take a little bit of inspiration from what Beetlejuice showed them.
Learn to throw your voice, fool your friends, fun and party.
Adam and Barbara go all out, performing their best bit of haunting yet at a dinner party peopled by Charles and Delia's yuppie city friends, forcing everyone at the table to sing Banana Boat by Harry Belafonte and dance the calypso against their will until the shrimp cocktail reaches out of the glasses and shoves their heads down. But instead of seeing a bunch of scared rich people running for the hills, all Adam and Barbara get is Lydia coming up the attic stairs, knocking on the door, and saying her parents want them to come down. Charles, his mind abuzz in ways to capitalize on this haunted house, watches as his guests and his dreams of making money while relaxing in the countryside walk out the door when the Maitlands refuse to show and their guests leave disappointed. Charles, Delia, and Otho storm the attic to break down the door and confront these ghosts and ask them why they want to steal all their money. Charles, Delia, and Otho storm the attic, the door of which has been locked to everyone with a heartbeat except for Lydia, and find, to the surprise of both themselves and the viewers in the audience, that the attic is empty, save for the model of Winter River, of course, and, most importantly, the handbook for the recently deceased that Otho pockets. The Maitlands need to keep better track of that book. They are just willy-nilly throwing that thing around, and it's getting them into trouble. Then they leave, and the Maitlands pull themselves through the attic window. They were hiding. They were being sneaky. They didn't want to be seen. While all this is going on, we get a nice little cutaway to Beetlejuice, who laughs at them. He says, ha, because that's basically what he sounds like.
Now, let's turn on the juice and see what shakes loose.
Beetlejuice is technically on call and hired for this job because they said his name 3 times and then they never sent him away. So he decides to take matters into his own hands and show them what a real bioexorcist can do. And what that is turning into a stair rail and then turning that stair rail into a giant snake with his head instead of a snake's head, and then violently terrifying everyone who lives there and trying to corner our dear sweet Lydia. Barbara sends Beetlejuice back into the model by saying, Beetlejuice, Beetlejuice, Beetlejuice. Michael Keaton jump scare. And a distraught Lydia runs away from the Maitlands and back into her room because she can't figure out why these nice people that just so happen to be dead and that she's been getting along with so well would sick a weird creepy stairwell / giant snurpant with a weird dude's head instead of a snake's head on her. Their dear sweet Lydia. So the Maitlands go upstairs and they're like, Beetlejuice, what have you done? And he's like, listen, I'm sick of you. I'm sick of them. The only person he thinks he can actually get along with in this house is Edgar Allan Poe's daughter, Lydia, which doesn't bode well for Lydia, because I don't think they should be hanging out at all. As Charles puts together the plans he has for Winter River, which what he would like to do is turn it into an amusement park / paranormal research center, the Maitlands are summoned back to the world of the dead to answer to Juno for ignoring her very good advice and summoning Beetlejuice. Juno tells the Maitlands that they have messed up in a big way. First, by letting Lydia get a photo of them. Second, by letting Beetlejuice loose. And third and worst of all, by letting Otho get his hands on the handbook. So what the Maitlands need to do is get the Dietzes out of their house, get Beetlejuice in line, and get the handbook for the recently deceased back from Otho before the living get proof of life after death. But on their way back, the Maitlands realize that they don't want to listen to Juno. And honestly, that's not a big change. They haven't listened to Juno from the beginning. But the change that is big is the fact that they no longer want the Dietzes gone.
Oh, Adam, I can't go through with it. I like that little girl.
Because they want to stay with Lydia. She's the daughter they never got to have, and they'd rather put up with the uniqueness of the Dietzes in order to be with her, rather than have their house back. Anyway, their sentiments are sweet, their heads look kind of scary, but while all of this is happening, all of these tender revelations are being revealed, they've left Lydia frightened and hurt, emotionally hurt, in a house where Beetlejuice still has free reign. By this point in the story, Lydia has decided that life is no longer worth living and would like to be with the Maitlands. She would like to join them on the other side. But when she goes upstairs to find them and tell them and, talk it out before making a big decision, she finds Beetlejuice instead camped in the model. She recognizes him as the snake/stairwell, and he tells her that he can help her with her dilemma, just so long as she helps him first. She almost agrees. She gets as far as saying his name twice when the Maitlands return in the nick of time, and they tell Lydia that her life is too precious to throw away and that they want to stay and make things work so they can all be together. But it's a little bit too late for that particular happy ending because Charles has already invited his boss and his boss's paranormal obsessed wife to dinner, where he plans to dazzle them into buying up the town of Winter River and turning it into an amusement park / paranormal research center. Lydia tries to explain that the ghosts now want to coexist in peace, but the Dietzes aren't having any of it when fame and fortune are on the line. Otho has the handbook for the recently deceased, and he has the exact steps needed to summon a ghost, and so a ghost they shall summon. The Maitlands are summoned via exorcism, which early on in the movie we learned is death for the dead. They are brought back to the world of the living, given corporeal form in their wedding clothes, because that's all that the Dietzes had left of theirs, and immediately they start to wither and rot. Lydia, desperate not to lose the Maitlands, runs to the model and asks Beetlejuice for help. He says he will. He's going to help her. But on one condition, and one condition only. He's sick of being dead. He's sick of being stuck in the afterlife. He wants to return to the land of the living. And the only way he can do that is by marrying someone who's alive. A little like marriage fraud. He'll help the Maitlands if Lydia agrees to marry him. Lydia, as I said, is desperate. So she agrees, and Beetlejuice is let loose on the house. He gets the Maitlands back to where they should be. They go back to their normal Adam and Barbara looking selves. He sends the boss's wife, and Otho packing. And then, wedding bells are ringing. It's time for somebody to get married, and that somebody is Lydia. She finds herself suddenly in a bright red wedding dress and veil. Beetlejuice is now dressed in a complimentary maroon tuxedo. And everybody who's not a bioexorcist is not really on board with this plan. Lydia's parents, who don't want to see their daughter marry this weird guy, are trapped inside Delia's sculptures as witnesses. The Maitlands try to send him back, but at first they can't speak because when they were getting exorcised, exorcism-sized, sorry, I had to sit with the fact that I said that, and now I'm back. Okay. The Maitlands, slowly returning to their normal selves, are initially unable to speak, so they can't call Beetlejuice's name and stop the wedding. Charles and Delia are then trapped by Delia's unnerving sculptures to serve as witnesses, and Beetlejuice summons a weird-looking little alien priest from the afterlife so the ceremony can begin. The Maitlands keep trying to call Beetlejuice's name, but he keeps figuring out ways to stop them. He zaps their teeth out of their mouth, he puts a zipper on their lips, he puts a steel plate over their mouth, he sends Adam into the model, he sends Barbara back onto the sands of Saturn's moon Titan. And when Lydia tries to say no, he speaks for her, literally throwing his hand over her mouth and then stealing her voice to say,
"I'm Lydia Dietz and I'm of sound mind. You asked me, I'm answering. Yes, I love that man of mine."
The wedding's trucking right along. It seems like there's no stopping this train as Beetlejuice pulls out the ring. It's still on a lady's finger. He tells Lydia,
I'm telling you, honey, she meant nothing to me. Nothing at all.
Just before the priest says man and wife, just before it's too late, Barbara crashes through the ceiling, riding the sandworm, sicks it on Beetlejuice, and nobody who isn't already married gets married to anybody, thank God. Fast forward forward 4 months, we see Lydia biking away from school. She's happy, she's on good terms with the other girls, and she's still our goth queen. Charles is reading a handbook on coexistence between the living and the dead. Delia is making sculptures of the snake/stairwell with Beetlejuice's head, and Beetlejuice himself is still doing okay. We find him in the lobby of the afterlife waiting for his number to get called and smart-mouthing an African shaman who then sprinkles some magic dust on his head and then his head gets shrunk down. That's what happens to him at the end of the movie Beetlejuice. But we cut back to the land of the living where Barbara and Adam have become co-parents with the Dietzes, and Lydia no longer feels so alone. They ask her how she did on her tests. She tells them she passed all of them, and as a reward, they do a little bit of light haunting so that she can sing "Shake, shake, shake, Sonora, shake your body," while the We Are Marshall football team congas behind her. And that is the end of Beetlejuice. They are happy, all is well, and that is the end of the original Beetlejuice film. Now, I am going to spoil stuff about the movie, so just keep that in mind. And if I can remember, I'm going to put a timestamp for when you should skip to if you haven't seen it yet. I waited several weeks, so hopefully everybody who was eager could go watch it. Okay, so anyway, 36 years have passed since Beetlejuice was released, and 36 years have passed for our dear sweet Lydia Dietz, who is now the host of a TV show called Ghost House, in which she investigates haunted houses for distressed homeowners. This is because Lydia never lost the ability to see or speak with the dead, and thanks to her manager/boyfriend, that ability has now become her career. The set is styled after the attic where the Maitlands spent most of their time in the original, but the taping that Lydia's in the middle of is interrupted unexpectedly, first by the sight of Beetlejuice in the audience, where he definitely should not be, and second by her stepmother's frantic texts. Delia has continued her art career. She is just as avant-garde as she was in the first movie, and she is the one to break it to Lydia that her father has passed away. Charles is dead due to a plane crash/shark attack. Delia, Lydia, and Lydia's terrible boyfriend, whose name escapes me and I don't feel like looking it up, I think it might be Rowley, we're just going to call him her terrible boyfriend, hit the road, and they pick up Lydia's somewhat estranged teenage daughter from boarding school to go to the funeral in Winter River, Connecticut, and pack up the house. Meanwhile, in the afterlife, Danny DeVito dies a second death at the hands of Monica Bellucci. She is Beetlejuice's ex-wife, owner of the ring and the ring finger from the wedding scene in the first movie. And, she really let herself fall apart after the split. But she doesn't let that stop her. We live in a post-Barbie world, and I think we all know that girls can do anything, including and not limited to stapling their dismembered corpse back together to the tune of Tragedy by the Bee Gees. Then we circle back to the Juice himself right after he jump scares Lydia for a second time. He tells his assistant, a shrunken-headed gentleman named Bob, that long-distance relationships can be difficult, especially when one of you is dead and the other's been ignoring you for 30 years. Beetlejuice's lamentations about his relationship woes are interrupted when he is summoned to the underworld police station. It is there we meet Willem Dafoe. Willem Dafoe is an actor who played a detective who always did his own stunts until a stunt went awry, and now in the afterlife he is a detective who has to remember that he's just an actor and keep it real. That's what he does. He does that throughout the whole movie. Now, I think that they really just let Willem have fun. They just let him loose on that set. They gave him an assistant character who brought him a coffee every single time she showed up on screen. And I think that they just let him have fun, and it was fun to watch. Willem Dafoe's character warns Beetlejuice that his ex-wife is on the hunt for her truant husband. Then we get a delightful sequence where, in a black and white flashback in Italian, Beetlejuice tells us of how he fell for his bride when he was just a humble grave robber during the Black Death, and she was a beautiful and murderous leader of a soul-sucking death cult. And on account of the whole murderous leader of a death cult thing, she definitely tries to kill him on their wedding night. And while he's dying, he kills her right back with an axe, hence the need for all the staples. It is not an amicable split. in the slightest. And so Beetlejuice goes back to his thriving bioexorcist call center. He has done well for himself since the 80s, and he sees in the obituaries that Charles Dietz is dead and that Lydia is back in Winter River, back in the Maitland's home, and back with the model of the town he still has access to. Now, more than ever, it would be really nice to commit a little marriage fraud and become a member of the land of the living once more. The day of the funeral dawns, and a children's choir sings a haunting choral arrangement of Harry Belafonte's Banana Boat Song. And we learn that the discord between Lydia and her daughter Astrid is two-pronged. Lydia's antics on her hugely popular Ghost House show has made Astrid the laughingstock of her school, and Astrid doesn't believe in ghosts, doesn't believe her mom can see ghosts, and if her mom can see so many ghosts, why can't she see the one ghost that Astrid wants her to see, that of her dead father? Now, I've mentioned Lydia's terrible boyfriend, played perfectly by Justin Theroux, and he really shines, really cements his terribleness when, at her father's wake, he proposes to Lydia. If she says yes, they can get married in 2 days on Lydia's favorite holiday, Halloween. Because of, the whole audience of people there to commiserate her father's passing and her horrible boyfriend's own pouting, Lydia is pressured into agreeing, at which point Astrid decides to bike angrily into town, where we see Winter River looks much the same, though certain things have changed. For example, the hardware store that Adam Maitland owned back in the first movie is now a coffee shop, and the town is charmingly decorated for Halloween. After a few near misses with cars, Astrid loses control of her bike, crashes through a fence, and rides straight into a tree. This tree, a classic Tim Burton tree by the way, has a treehouse, and in the treehouse is a guy who is eerily reminiscent of Matthew Gray Gubler, and he is reading Dostoevsky. Turns out Astrid herself has read Crime and Punishment 3 times, and our swooning new beau invites Astrid back if she ever wants to hang out, get a break from her crazy family. It's 9:37 at night. I have not eaten dinner, but I said, Summer, you put red lipstick on today and it's still on your mouth, so you should probably just do the video while you're made up, and then you can have dinner. So that's where we are. And it turns out the very next day, Astrid needs that break. Because her grandma is trying to turn her grief into art, her mom's horrible boyfriend is planning a wedding nobody wants, and her mom is trying to pack up the house. So on this second hangout, he takes her inside. He walks past his parents who are ignoring him. They're always ignoring him, and he goes upstairs. Astrid sees a handbook for the recently deceased in his room, and he's like, oh, I got that at a garage sale, which that tracks. What happened to the Maitland's copy of the handbook for the recently deceased, right? And then he's like, well, if you're not doing anything on Halloween, you could come over here and hand out candy. And she's like, oh, I wish I could, but I am doing something, my mom's wedding. And he's like, well, you could come beforehand. And she's like, oh my gosh, I guess I could come. I guess I'll come beforehand. And then he's like, okay, well, I guess it's a date. And then they're like, oh my gosh, a date. So she is going to go to his house and hand out candy before her mom's Halloween wedding at midnight. Oh, also, we learned from Lydia that the Maitlands were able to find a loophole that allowed them to pass on early, which is the canonical reason why Adam and Barbara are not in the sequel. I think the real reason is that ghosts don't age, but actors do, but I like that they have an explanation. Flying home on the wings of young love, Astrid returns to the house and heads up to the attic, where she finds the Maitland's model, a scrapbook of old photos of her mom and dad, and a flyer from Beetlejuice. When Lydia finds her up there, the two of them share a tender moment as they reminisce about Astrid's dad, who perished in the Amazon and whose body was never found. But Lydia freaks out when she sees the Beetlejuice flyer, because that's concrete proof that she is not losing her mind, and she has, in fact, been seeing the ghost with the most. I call him that because that's what he himself calls himself. He calls himself that in the first movie. Lydia's terrible boyfriend, now fiance, stumbles upon this scene, sees how upset Lydia is. What's wrong, my beloved? What's wrong, my bride? What could possibly be wrong on this, the day of our wedding, our nuptials? And she says, whatever your name is, there is something I've been hiding from you. And what I've been hiding from you is the plot of the 1988 classic Beetlejuice. Her fiancé obviously does not believe her, and to shake her out of whatever freakout she's in the middle of, he decides to prove her wrong and says, Beetlejuice, Beetlejuice, Beetlejuice. Michael Keaton jump scare, which sucks them both into the model and puts Lydia and Beetlejuice face to face for the first time in 36 years. What follows is a scene in which Beetlejuice masquerades as a couples counselor for the fed up Lydia and the shrieking fiance, complete with a horrible, horrible, terrible, wicked, awful, horrible to look at little Beetlejuice baby that I could have done entirely without. Lydia finally sends them home. She tries to get the whole family out of the house as soon as possible, but Astrid, who's just now starting to reconnect with her, is like, I can't go. I have a date. Aww. And Lydia decides to stay. The sun sets, Halloween night descends, and Lydia drops Astrid off for her date. Before going to prep for the wedding that Delia, Astrid, nor Lydia seem all that jazzed about. We'll go to Astrid first. Just a girl on her very first date. Oh my gosh, she shares a sweet little kiss with her handsome beau and finds herself floating several feet off the ground, shades of Cat and Casper from Casper, 1995. Because, surprise, the Matthew Gray Gubler look-alike who reads Dostoevsky and had a copy of the Handbook for the Recently Deceased is Dad. He's dead. He fell out of the treehouse while his parents were fighting. He landed on his neck wrong, and now he wants so dearly to return to the land of the living. And that's something Astrid can actually help him with. And so I'm thinking, oh my gosh, wedding plot part 2, Electric Boogaloo? No, that's not what happens. It's not even suggested. Apparently there's a different way. Astrid, at this point, for obvious and understandable reasons, is freaking out as her entire worldview shifts because she apparently shares her mother's gift and also ghosts are real. She'd prefer to call her mom and get a little bit of advice first, but not Matthew Gray Gubler tells her a little something, throws a little something out to sweeten the pot. If Astrid helps him, she'll get to see her dad. This is an offer, of course, that Astrid cannot refuse, so not Matthew Gray Gubler draws a door on the brick wall and knocks 3 times, just as the Maitlands did in the original. He has Astrid read something in Latin, which he tells her will allow her to walk through the world of the dead. She does not question this, nor does she ask for a translation in English. She just reads it. She just reads the Latin from the Weird Dead book, and the two step into the afterlife. Meanwhile, back at the ranch, and by the ranch, I mean the old Beetlejuice house from the original 1988 Beetlejuice, the house that they are now packing up because the dad is dead, Lydia has been prepping for the wedding and the sale of the house, as she has been this entire movie, and learns from the realtor, and the realtor in this case is actually the daughter of the original realtor from the original movie. We saw her several times as a child in Beetlejuice. Anyway, the realtor tells Lydia that the house where Lydia just dropped her daughter off, yeah, that's been known as the murder house for the past decade or so, ever since the teenage boy who lived there killed his parents and then fell out of the treehouse and broke his neck while he was trying to flee from the police. So Lydia, she's running as fast as her platform boots can take her, and she gets there just in time to see the brick door swing closed behind her daughter, and she has but one choice: Beetlejuice, Beetlejuice, Beetlejuice. Michael Keaton jump scare. And you know what? Beetlejuice is there for her. He agrees to help her. Same deal as in the original. He'll rescue someone she loves from imminent death if she agrees to marry him so he can cross back over to the land of the living. And just as with the original deal, she agrees. The two break into the afterlife. Alarms are blaring. Willem Dafoe is hot on their trail. A bunch of shrunken-headed call center workers escape through the hole in the wall and start wreaking havoc on the town of Winter River, Connecticut. All the while, Beetlejuice's jilted, chopped up, stapled back together, dead bride Dolores is still stalking the wonky checkered halls. A lot's going on. Astrid gets led to immigration with her handsome undead boy toy, thinking of nothing but the hope of seeing her father until she gets her picture taken. Something in the very bright flash of her getting her picture taken drains her of her strength. And her wicked, lying, deceitful date, who has never been and never will be Dr. Spencer Reed on Criminal Minds, he tells her that the little Latin paragraph she read, that was just her agreeing to trade her life for his so that she gets a one-way ticket on the Soul Train and he gets to cross back over to the land of the living. Gotta say, I prefer Beetlejuice's method. I mean, it's marriage fraud, yes, but it's much less deceitful, and both parties get to live in that scenario. Astrid is dragged off to the Soul Train, and not Thew Gray Gubler. It's like Matthew, but I put the word not instead of Matt, so it's not Thew Gray Gubler. Anyway, Astrid is dragged off to the Soul Train, and Matthew Grey Goobler takes his passport to be stamped. Now, that's key because the transfer of souls will not be official until that stamp happens. Now, I've said Soul Train several times, and the Soul Train is a train that takes people's souls to the great beyond, but it's also a train in which a lot of soul music is played. You see, it's a pun, you see, and it delights me. And as she's getting dragged across the platform, she sees her father hard at work behind one of the glass windows. You know, and I actually want to comment a little bit more on that, but it's a sensitive subject, and I don't actually feel like getting into it, but I just... Please see this clip.
If I knew then what I know now, I wouldn't have had my little accident.
And this clip.
You know what they say about people who commit suicide? In the afterlife, they become civil servants.
And tell me why her father is working in the afterlife. It is never explained, but one has to assume, and the rest of the movie doesn't seem to be telling that story. So was it a mistake? Was it what was actually supposed to happen? I don't know. Do you? Speak into the mic. All right. Okay, so by that point, Lydia and Beetlejuice have split up. Beetlejuice to do whatever it is he plans on doing, Lydia to go get Astrid off the Soul Train. She finds her daughter just in time. The two of them run out through an emergency exit, find themselves on the yellow sands of Saturn's moon Titan. They see the sandworm. They are rescued by Astrid's father, whose ghostly body is still being eaten by the piranhas who got to him when he had his untimely boating accident in the Amazon. And they have a very sweet family moment where Astrid gets to say goodbye to her father, and her dad says, you know, Astrid, you and your mom make each other better. You guys gotta stick together. And I love a mother-daughter bonding story. I love a healing moment. And then they all go run to the ticket booth to stop that kid from getting his ticket stamped and her soul being traded away. But they get there right in time to see the stamp come down on the passport. Curtains for Astrid. But good news, Beetlejuice was the stamper, and it wasn't a real stamp, and Matthew Grey Goobler is sent into the fiery pit on account of the murder. The dad sends him up a ladder that leads to the real world. They come out of a mausoleum in the graveyard of the church where Lydia's wedding to her horrible boyfriend is still taking place. And guess what? It's Halloween, it's midnight, the wedding's happening right now. So Astrid and Lydia run to the altar, and the wedding is promptly crashed by Beetlejuice, there to claim his runaway bride. What follows is an exquisite piece of cinema, an outrageously long dream sequence in which Beetlejuice and Lydia, he in his burgundy suit and her in her red wedding dress, that was hard to say, make their way down the aisle as Beetlejuice forces everyone to sing MacArthur Park, a 7-minute long ballad from the 1970s about cake washing away in the rain, sung by the actor who played Dumbledore. And this scene serves as the sequel's sort of homage to the voice-throwing dinner party scene in the original. And I love everything about it. I love every single second. All our plots finally tie themselves together. The underworld cops crash the wedding, Dolores shows up, and Lydia's horrible boyfriend, whatever his name is foisted upon her in an I Love Dolores t-shirt. And you know what? It's fine that that's his fate, because he's horrible. And he already admitted just a few minutes earlier in the film that he didn't even love Lydia. He was only marrying her because he could make more money off of her as her husband than he could as her manager. So he's bad news, and to the sandworm he goes, for indeed, Astrid summons the sandworm, which takes out Lydia's horrible boyfriend and Dolores in one fell swoop. Beetlejuice tries to claim that the wedding is still on, but Astrid says, hey, no, because you broke the law to sneak my mom into the afterlife. That means your contract is null and void. So no wedding for Lydia in either case, no returning to the real world for Beetlejuice. And Delia, by the way, gets to join her dearly departed husband in the afterlife because of a side plot I neglected to tell you about, in which Delia, as part of one of her art pieces, orders several defanged asps in order to complete an ancient Egyptian mourning ritual. But the people conned her and the asps weren't defanged, and as she was on camera filming herself with these two snakes in her hands, they both bite her in the throat and she dies. Bye, Delia. You were one of my favorite parts of these movies. And she and her husband reconvene on the Soul Train. Then we get a very sweet, very tender sort of epilogue in which Lydia cancels her show. She travels with Astrid. Astrid falls in love, gets married, has a baby, and right when you're thinking, wow, this is a surprisingly saccharine ending for a Beetlejuice movie, Astrid gives birth to the same creepy, weird-looking, ugly, disgusting, stupid Beetlejuice baby from earlier in the movie. Now, I love babies. I don't love when people try and make babies scary. Get that grody Beetlejuice baby out of here. I don't like it. Babies are cute. Anyway, Astrid giving birth to that weird-looking Beetlejuice baby is horrifying enough that it forces Lydia to wake up. But when Lydia wakes up, Beetlejuice pops up in the bed next to her and says, "Oh my gosh, I just had a terrible nightmare." And then Lydia wakes up a second time, alone in her own bed. It is a dream within a dream. Tim Burton making Christopher Nolan proud. And that's it. That's the movie. That's Beetlejuice Beetlejuice. Now that we've gone over the plot of both movies, I want to talk a little bit about why I feel like the sequel was such a successful follow-up to the first one. Now, Beetlejuice itself is a classic. It's a movie I watch at least once a year whenever it gets around this time, September, October. And I went into the movie low expectations. I was thinking, we live in a society, unfortunately. Where, I don't know, it just feels like so many of the things that are being made lately are the bare minimum to get people into the seats, but they're not actually trying to tell stories anymore. I feel like the art of telling a story on film has been dwindling significantly, at least in like a post-Infinity War world or post-Endgame where, I don't know, I don't want to get philosophical about it. I just feel like we've got too many nostalgia movies, and I thought that this was going to be one of them, right? But color me so delightfully surprised when this was not just a nostalgia cash grab. It actually tells a story and expands really well on the world of the original. Like, it's a great successor to the original story, but it doesn't feel like it's just doing the same thing again and again. That's because the nods to the original are just that. They're nods. They're homages to the original without taking away or distracting from the story. It's not like in the fourth or fifth Pirates movie when Captain Jack Sparrow is still making jokes about rum because that's what he did in the first one, but now he's just a parody or a shell of the man he was in the first Pirates movie. It's not like that. They're actually just little nods to make you go, ah, yeah, Beetlejuice. I love that movie. So, like, for example, the choral arrangement of Harry Belafonte's Banana Boat, or the way that the dream sequence wedding musical number was a parallel for the dinner party lip syncing scene in the original. And I love the detail that I heard from a friend that like Michael Keaton said he would sign on to this movie if he had the exact same amount of screen time. So I'm pretty sure Beetlejuice had around 19 minutes of screen time in the first movie. He has about 19 minutes here. So it's not, again, sorry to be harping on the Pirates movies. I rewatched those three earlier this year. The first three hold up. The first one especially is fantastic. But it's like, you know how as we go through the Pirates movies, it just becomes the Captain Jack Sparrow show and it loses a lot of its nuance? This didn't become the Beetlejuice show. Like it was balanced. It was good. And then, of course, there's the opening with the models. There's the fact that the realtor's daughter, who was a little girl in the original, is now a realtor herself, and she has her own daughter that she's dragging around to real estate showings. And then the things that aren't nods are continuations or new developments that tie back to the world of the original. So, for example, Dolores, the whole character of Dolores, learning the backstory of the ring and the ring finger that Beetlejuice had, learning about Beetlejuice's own death. And I think one of my favorite continuations is the fact that Beetlejuice was still trying to marry Lydia in this. Now, it's clear from both movies that the driving force behind Beetlejuice's desire to marry Lydia is he wants to commit marriage fraud and get out of the afterlife. So that's the main reason, especially with his crazy ex driving around. But there is, of course, that element of that trope. You know the trope. Weird, creepy guy tries to force girl to marry him. We all know that trope. It happens in Phantom of the Opera, and it happens in Labyrinth, and one could argue it happens in the 2005 King Kong, minus the marriage, and weird, creepy guy is replaced with giant, sad gorilla who definitely shouldn't go to New York. I'm devolving into a little bit of a tangent, but let me just go on that brief tangent, shall I? When I saw that they were making a Beetlejuice sequel and that they'd cast Jenna Ortega as Lydia's daughter, and she's perfect, by the way, she fits seamlessly into this world, I was so worried they were just gonna mindlessly rehash the marriage plot, but have Beetlejuice gunning yet again for the youngest person in this movie. But I cannot tell you how relieved I am to find that Beetlejuice has proven himself a one-woman creep, and I love to see it. Too often, lately, the creepy fictional stalker weirdos have no loyalty. I am, of course, referring to your average Criminal Minds unsub or your Joes from You, the guys based sort of dubiously in reality who are scary and weird in a real-life gross way. But for me personally, if you're going to be an insane fictional stalker weirdo who's trying to force someone to marry you, and I don't know, the lady doth protest too much, indeed the lady gets away, then at least have the decency, the plot consistency to pine eternally, or to die of a broken heart a la Eric, the Phantom of the Opera from Gaston Leroux's 1910 novel of the same name. So I was worried Beetlejuice was just going to go full on Joe from You, brand new season, brand new victim. But no, he said, I want to commit marriage fraud with one person and one person only. And that's Edgar Allan Poe's daughter.
I always said if I ever did it, I was going to do it once, and that was it. Well,
he is a one-woman fraudster, and I appreciate that. Also, just to clarify, in general, it's better not to be a creepy stalker weirdo, nor should you try to force women into matrimony, nor should anyone attempt to marry children. What we're talking about now is extremely case-specific, fictional crazy people who are fake and aren't real and don't exist, and therefore can be a little crazy and weird because, say it with me, it's fiction. In real life, we don't do that, okay? Yay, all right. Now, was the sequel a little overindulgent and perhaps a tad longer than it needed to be? Sure, yes, fine, but the thing is I wanted it to overindulge. I was having a delightful time. I had a blast. It gave me wonderful little bits like Willem Dafoe's assistant who came in every scene with a cup of coffee. Oh, I loved it. And I also really loved the mother-daughter aspect, both with Delia and Lydia, as well as Lydia and Astrid. Now, the contention between the Dietzes from the first movie, particularly with Delia and Lydia, is, at the end of the original, somewhat resolved when the three of them come together as a family after, you know, a 600-year-old weird demon guy tried to marry their teenage daughter. Hi, Mitzi. I gotta see my script. But it was enough to know that some healing was beginning. Then, in the sequel, we get to see how Lydia and Delia's relationship has matured. And I think the sequel handled the passage of time really well. The characters were still recognizably the Delia and Lydia from the original, especially in those big, broad strokes ways. But the characters were different enough that you could easily believe that 30 years of new experience has elapsed. I think a problem that sometimes happens when an older work is revisited is they put the characters in the same mindset they were during the duration of the show or movie rather than where they ended. A good example of this is Gilmore Girls, A Year in the Life, because throughout Gilmore Girls, the whole series, we're learning, Lorelai and Luke, they spend the whole, 7 seasons falling in love. And so when they end engaged and happy, it's like, oh, good, they're engaged. This is the end of the season. They're going to be together forever. They had Year in the Life come out, and I was excited to see it. And I was like, oh, we're going to get to see Lorelai and Luke together. And you would figure at that point they would be in love still and be married. But instead, they decided to have them still just be engaged and still be sort of on again, off again. And Lorelai has to go on some weird journey of discovery when 10 years had passed since they were engaged. And it's like, no, but I don't care that we finally got to see their wedding. I would have rather not seen their wedding and seen them be Lorelai and Luke in love and married. What does that look like? But they opted to go for the status quo of Lorelai and Luke sort of butting against each other and the will they, won't they, when we knew they would. They already had. And so that was a completely unscripted tangent. But in this Beetlejuice sequel, they did not have Lydia and Delia with the same dynamic that Lydia and Delia had when Lydia was a teenager and Delia was her new stepmother, and there was contention and they didn't really like each other and they were butting heads a lot. We got to see Delia and Lydia as adults who had spent the last 36 years as family, and while there was still some, they were witty with each other, there was some banter back and forth, but they were family at this point. And I thought that was a really cool dynamic that we got to see the matured version of the relationship, and it didn't just fall back on what was proven as funny and successful in the original. And then I'm a sucker for a good mother-daughter plot, so I loved getting to see Lydia and Astrid start sort of separated, and then over the course of the story find their way back to each other. And we especially get to see that Delia-Lydia bond in moments where Astrid is being particularly moody and very reminiscent of Lydia in the original. And Delia has to be there to remind her that it was like, hey, Lydia, you were like that at this age, and it's a phase. I'm never sad when there's a mother-daughter story tied into something like this. So there were great story elements, lots of fun bits and great scenes, several interesting storylines to follow that I feel were more or less satisfactorily tied up. Monica Bellucci didn't really do much, but it was enough to have that Italian black and white flashback scene and to see her walking around in a cool dress and to have her serve as a sort of red herring so we didn't pick up on the Matthew Gray Goobler lookalike. So we didn't pick up on the Matthew Gray Goobler lookalike as the real villain of the movie. So I really liked it. It honored the original movie while being able to stand on its own. They treated it like a story itself, gave it the care and attention that you should give a movie rather than treating it like an entry into a franchise. And it delighted me. I was delighted and I was very happy about it. Okay. One last final tangent before I wrap this up. Well, final tangent, then I'm going to show you the menu, and then we'll wrap this up. Anyway, a little bit of personal backstory. I've seen the original Beetlejuice. I don't know if you picked that up from this, but I've watched it before. Now, initially, I wouldn't take I've seen the original Beetlejuice to be a novel or interesting statement, because this is a Halloween staple. It's a Halloween season classic. It hits September, October, and you watch Beetlejuice and you watch Casper. That's the way it is. Or at least, that's the way it was in the lawless wasteland I grew up in the wild, wild west. I have since, as an adult, moved to the American South. And upon the advent of the new movie's release, I decided to gauge the interest of my friends in town to see who might want to go see it. Well, color me surprised and confused when I landed on this unexpected truth. Half the people I know in town have never seen the original. Two of my closest friends in town had not seen the original movie until maybe a year or two ago, and one of them was with me when I showed it to them, and neither of them liked it. A different friend has put a moratorium on all spooky 90s classics, so that was a no-go. A coworker told me her parents wouldn't let her watch it as a kid because they were, in her own words, pretty conservative, while a separate coworker was going to see the sequel, but she and her husband both needed to see the original first. And at this point, I've started polling everyone I meet, random strangers on the street. You, sir, you, ma'am, Beetlejuice? 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 Did you see it? Did you watch it as a child? Did you like it? Were you scared of it? I have to know. Please, tell me. I have to know. But like, this has shaken me to my very core. The world I knew no longer exists. In the world I knew, the world I understood, this was just a movie that came on once a year and you'd watch it. It would happen and it would happen to you and you'd just watch Beetlejuice. I don't think I'd be exaggerating if I said I've seen this movie 31 times because I'm 31 years old and this is my 31st Halloween. So, like, it's just one of those things, you know? And then to find, like, almost every single person I know in this town, in this new life I've built for myself, has either never seen it, saw it once and didn't like it, or were scared of it as children and have never seen it since. It boggles the mind. And I have to ask myself, is this like a West Coast, East Coast thing, like different cultures in different parts of the country? I just don't know at this point, and I am very interested in more data. So please, if you would like to aid me in my quest, let me know if you watched Beetlejuice as like a Halloween staple, something that just came on and you watched it, you liked it, or you weren't bothered by it. It was just something that you've watched because it's like something that you've watched. Or if it's something that you've never seen or are scared of or got spooked of as a child and you've never returned to it. And then tell me if you grew up on the West or the East Coast of these United States. For all of my people in Canada and any other part of the globe, you can tell me too, but I'm more looking for data in my homeland so that I could figure this out. I don't even know if I'll put any of this in here, but it boggles the mind. My mind? Significantly boggled. Anyway, because this is part 3 in a Gentleman's Guide to Chivalry and or an off-the-shelf review, we must now take a look at the DVD itself. It's got a nice table of contents for the different scenes. Here's the back of it where they misuse the word yuppie. Here's the sticker telling me that I bought this from the thrift store sometime after November 20th of 2018 for $1.99. And here's the menu. All right, so we've got, honestly, this menu is not doing it for me. I think it's a little lackluster. The DVD actually starts without even going to the menu. There are no previews. The movie just starts immediately. And then this pops up when you let the credits run all the way through or if you hit the menu button. And then I just feel like blurry pictures, weird, like, look behind the... Now, okay, we got Beetlejuice as the title. It looks fine. But what's going on in the background? We've got the Warner Bros. Logo behind everything. Like, just a faded Warner Bros. Logo back there, okay? Then we got the stairs of the house. We've got the shrunken head guy, Otho, Charles, Delia, Lydia, Beetlejuice. Okay, that's all fine. We got the Warner Brothers logo again. They really want us to know Warner Brothers did this. And that's fine, you know? Pump your brand. But inside the words here, see this box here with the words? Bad font choice, not at all Beetlejuicy. It's just a standard serif font. Dare I say it's probably Times, Baskerville even. I could figure it out if I wanted to, but I'm not going to get into specifics. And just the weird gray buttons, and then in the buttons you've got Adam, and then you've got that goofy looking Beetlejuice carnival still, and then Barbara. Like, it is not a well put together And what's that little guy in the corner? What's that weird little goofy looking... Is that the top of the... I think it is. I think in the corner, in the bottom left, yeah, that's the left corner. There's the top of Beetlejuice's tomb from the movie. I don't like it. I think they could have done better. And hey, final thing, I can hear you. Summer, don't go until you tell us how's your book going. Oh, my book? My gothic novel that I'm writing? My gothic novel that I'm on the 3rd draft of, and then once I finish this 3rd draft, I'm gonna try and send it to publishers and or self-publish it myself. That book? Thank you for asking. Oh my gosh, you guys are always so considerate. Anyway, I have been stuck on chapter 11 for a long time because every time I tried to go to chapter 12, I could feel like something was wrong. I was hitting a brick wall. But the other day, I took the phrase "kill your darlings" and I did a little something different. I Dr. Frankensteined my darlings. I read chapters 12, 13, and a little bit of 14, and I realized that the issue was in the flow. So it was like all this momentum had built up in my new draft 3 to chapter 11, only to when I got to the chapter, the previously written draft 2, chapter 12 and 13, they were basically nothing chapters where nothing really happened, and then another big event happened in chapter 14. And I was like, I'm not going to make my readers sit there and go through 2 nothing chapters to get to the cool thing in chapter 14. But there were important little details that help lead toward the end of the story that were seeded throughout those nothing chapters. So what I started doing was I started chopping stuff up and sewing it together in new and exciting ways so that my darlings, dead, now live again, okay? So I took like the middle of chapter 13 and I made that the new beginning of chapter 12, and the detail I liked from chapter 12 I wove in as more of I intend to weave in more as a throwaway line, and then a different thing that was a cool scene that happened, I reworked that so that another detail could be like found. I chopped it and then I sewed it. I worked deep into the night. Oh, madness! Should I be allowed? What does this say about the nature of humanity? I'm speaking more about Frankenstein at this point. Anyway, I'm really excited. Basically what I did was I wrote myself a really long note in giant font so I would remember what my thought process was, and then I went to my 2nd draft where it's like the untouched part I haven't worked with yet, and I copied and pasted the chunks of the book in the new order that I'm putting them in, so as I edit through, it's in the shape that I want it to be. So that's where we are with the sequel. I'm on chapter 12 still, or not the sequel. That's where we are with my book. I'm on chapter 12 still. I'm very excited. And with all of that, we've now reached the end. God bless and have a wonderful night, evening, day, morning. Goodbye. Beetlejuice then draws a bomb on the brick wall, and the 2 of them blast their way into the afterlife. And now, alarms are blaring. Willem Dafoe is hot on their trail. A bunch of shrunken-headed call center workers. The 2 break into the afterlife. The 2 of them break into the afterlife. The 2 of them break into the afterlife, setting alarms blaring. Willem Dafoe is hot on their trail. A bunch of shrunken-headed call center workers escape through the hole in the wall and go terrorize the town of Winter River, Connecticut. All while Beetlejuice's jilted, chopped up X is still... All while Beetlejuice's jilted, chopped up, and stapled together X is still The 2 break into the afterlife, alarms bearing Willem Dafoe hot on their trail, a bunch of shrunken-headed call center workers escaping out into the real world and wreaking havoc on the town of Winter River, Connecticut, all while Beetlejuice's jilted, chopped up, and stapled back together X is still stalking the wonky checkered halls. The 2 break into the afterlife, alarms blaring, Willem Dafoe's hot on their tail, a bunch of shrunken-headed call center workers escaping to the town of Winter River, Connecticut, The 2 break into the afterlife, alarms blaring, Willem Dafoe's hot on their head. The 2 break into the afterlife, alarms are blaring, Willem Dafoe is hot on their trail, a bunch of shrunken-headed call center workers The 2 break into the afterlife, The two break into the afterlife. The two break into the afterlife. Alarms are blaring. Willem Dafoe is hot in their trail. A bunch of shrunken-headed call center workers break into the town of Winter River, Connecticut, and the two break into the afterlife. The two break into the afterlife. Alarms are blaring. Willem Dafoe is hot on their trail. A bunch of shrunken-headed call center workers escape into the real world and terrorize the town of Winter River, Connecticut. All the while, Beetlejuice is jilted, chopped up, stapled together. The two break into the afterlife. Alarms are blaring. Willem Dafoe is hot on his... The two break into the afterlife. The two break into the afterlife. Alarms are blaring. Willem Dafoe... The two break into the afterlife. Alarms are blaring. Willem Dafoe is hot on the trail. The two break into the afterlife. Alarms are... The two break into the afterlife. Alarms are blaring. Willem Dafoe is hot on their trail. A bunch of shrunken-headed call center workers escape through the hole in the wall and wreak havoc on the town of Winter River, Connecticut. All the while, Beetlejuice is jilted, chopped up, stapled back together. X is stalking the halls. The two break into the afterlife. Alarms are blaring. Willem Dafoe is hot on their trail. A bunch of shrunken-headed The two break into the afterlife. The two break into the afterlife. The two break into the The two break into the afterlife. Alarms are... The two break into the afterlife. Alarms are blaring. Willem Dafoe is hot on their trail. A bunch of shrunken-headed call center workers escape through the hole in the wall into the real world and terrorize the town of Winter River, Connecticut. The two escape... The two quite literally blast their way into the afterlife, leaving a gaping hole in the wall. The two break into the afterlife. Alarms are blaring. Willem Dafoe is hot on their trail. A bunch of shrunken-headed call center workers escape through the hole in the wall and terrorize the town of Winter River, Connecticut. All the while, Beetlejuice is chopped up, jilted, stapled back together. Oh my gosh, a bang is in my eye. Okay. The two break into the afterlife. Alarms are blaring. Willem Dafoe... The two break into the afterlife. Alarms are blaring. Willem Dafoe is hot on their trail. A bunch of shrunken-headed call center workers escape into the town of Winter River, Connecticut and start wreaking havoc. All the while, Beetlejuice is jilted, chopped up, stapled back together. Ex-wife Dolores is still stalking the wonky checkered halls. One more time.